I guess we're live.
Hey, everyone. Good to see you. We're back with Live with Love. It's Gretchen and Julie from Lift Our Voices. And I guess we're on like a waiting game right now, Julie. We're waiting to see when the Epstein files are going to be released and whether they will be released. What are we down to now? They have 30 days to do it. So are we down to like 25 now or 24 and counting?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I have some theories. I'd love to hear yours about what they're going to do. What do you think is going to happen?
I think that they'll try to use the DOJ investigation in New York to try to say that they can't release the files, or they'll release them heavily redacted, but that would take like 4,000 years to go through and do that because there's a million files, I guess, or something like that. But I think that there will be an insurrection in this country if they don't release them. So with all the other pressure that Trump's on right now with things not going his way, whether it's, the judge throwing out the Comey and Letitia James cases yesterday, or it's him not having his healthcare plan because Republicans revolted against it. Whatever the case is, I think he's under immense pressure right now. And I think this would just add to it if he doesn't release them. Maybe he doesn't care, but certainly pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell is off the table, I would assume, I hope. I wish somebody would ask him about that actually again. That's I think he's going to be forced to do it. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's interesting because he's got two things here that he can do to avoid this, right? One is he certainly can just effectively do what you just said. The second is he can use national security as a excuse not to do this. He can say that there are things that are classified. He's the president of the United States, can single-handedly classify all of them. And so there's no reason why he can't just say certain things here are classified, and then very well maybe things that are related to him or to friends of his, because he can say that he's the president of the United States and anything related to him is a matter of national security. And look, who's going to say no? I mean, the Justice Department is his Justice Department. It's his personal law firm at this point. So I'm a little skeptical that we're going to see anything here. I just want people to prepare themselves because I think there's been so much buildup. And it's very similar to me to what he now calls the Russia hoax. But, I can tell you it was certainly not a hoax, where people were expecting to see him and allies of his just go down for this. And the reality is it's very complicated. So I don't want people to get their hopes up. I think there's going to be some embarrassing stuff in there about some Democrats who he wants to use as a scalp, but I'm not so sure that we're going to be seeing the vast majority of what's in there. To your point, I think there's going to be a segment of even his own base that's going to say something here is not adding up. There'll be certainly people who are happy that he is not in there, but the reality is that I think will not see any part of this in totality.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with that we're going to see it. Julie's going to go with we might not see it all. I think that there will. Let's just back up a little bit too. There's a crack in MAGA right now, a big, huge one. You might call it a crevice. You might call it a Grand Canyon. It started with the vote 10 days ago in Republicans basically defying Trump, but then Trump lost that battle, so he gave his okay for them to vote yes on releasing the Epstein files. But to me, that was a massive victory for Republicans who may want to grow a spine and suddenly stand up to him on other issues. So I think this is one of those. Look, if he doesn't release these files now, and they all put their neck on the line and they all voted yes for it, except for one person in the House, I think that they're going to be hearing from their constituents, and they're going to be pressuring the White House to do, to release this stuff. So I think the game has changed here politically to the potential that Republicans are now going to stand up to him a little bit more. I mean, we'll be able to tell relatively soon. But what we saw it with the Affordable Care Act. Trump was going to extend the subsidies, and Republicans apparently said, we're not in favor of this. And he had to back off and say there's a 2-week delay. So I don't know. I think that there could be a situation where he's backed into a corner. He's going to have to release him.
Maybe, but I also think we're about to enter an election year, and it's not in their interest to throw him under the bus, because the worse he does, the worse they will do. I mean, their fates, by their own actions, are now so tied to him that it's a little late to have a Paul on the road to Damascus moment, at least for the midterms, where they say, you know what, never mind, this guy's really not the man we want to tie ourselves to. I think what you're seeing right now is a calculation between people who are trying to figure out whether this is going to hurt them by releasing them, and a calculation between people who believe it's going to hurt them more if they're not fully released. Again, if there's anything there that is damaging to either this president or to people close to him or to Republican donors, I think if you're making that calculus as a Republican running for office next year, which the entire House is and a third of the Senate, it's not so great. So
we already know it's damaging to Democrats, many of whom are not in office anymore, or,
right.
We're seeing Larry Summers at Harvard and those types of things having to step down and walk away. I'm not so sure current members of Congress are in the Epstein files.
No, that's not what I meant. Sorry.
But it's both sides from donor perspective. So, I think the American public at this point, aside from MAGA, realizes that it's both sides, and they just want them released, and they'll take the hits where they take the hits.
I hope you're right. It's so funny because you and I have these constant, Gretchen, for people who don't know, Gretchen and I have these constant debates about stuff, and sometimes I'm much more optimistic and she's a little bit more cynical, and in this case I think I'm a little bit more cynical than you are. So we'll see. I mean, we'll find out. Look, we'll find out in less than a month as to what's going to happen. But I do think there's going to be a mass revolt. The question is there going to be a mass revolt around the MAGA base, which is what Republican members, I think, care about. Some of them have primaries they have to worry about. And more importantly, they have to worry about turning out that base in the midterms, which is tough to do.
I will start a Washington rally if they are not released. So everyone can come and join me. Okay, we have an Instagram question. What does real accountability look like for institutions that protected Epstein and Maxwell for decades? Yeah, well, institutions we should put in parentheses, because are you talking about banks, for example? I mean, JP Morgan has put out a statement that they have exonerated themselves, that they got rid of him. I don't know, there's a big, huge, long piece I read about that. I'll let people make up their own decisions about that. I don't want to say one way or another. But yeah, I'm sure there's going to be high-ranking individuals. I'm sure there's going to be institutions. Look, everything's on the table. This is why we say that even though people feel like we've taken so many steps back as far as women's movement and other movements over the last couple of years, this is a positive side of those movements, that there is going to be accountability. And the only reason that there's going to be accountability is because of these movements and the courage of people in coming forward and telling their real stories, and that people believe them. That's why we're in this moment in time. So yes, I think there will be accountability. Julie?
Yeah, I think this is about more than just Epstein. And it's interesting because we just drafted an op-ed that hopefully will go out soon and we could all read it, but I'll just cut to the chase as to what's in there. Epstein is symptomatic of the problem. Epstein is not the problem in and of itself. I understand that it is truly the topic of discussion and has been for months and months and months. But if you take a step back and put Epstein in perspective, he is just a small kind of cog in the larger silencing of survivors. And the silencing of survivors has taken place for just years and years and years and decades, as a matter of fact. They do this, and I know this is going to sound a little self-serving, but sometimes they do it through NDAs and forced arbitration at work. Sometimes they do it through threats of lawsuits. And sometimes, as in the case of Epstein, I don't know if there's any NDAs involved. I'm positive there must be somewhere, but from what we know, Epstein did it because the system, quote unquote, allowed him to do it. And I keep going back to this non-prosecution agreement, this NPA that took place almost 20 years ago in 2007. that was given to him by the Southern District of Florida, by Alex Acosta, who then went on to become the labor secretary under Trump in the first administration, where they gave him this complete sweetheart deal and against the law. I mean, truly in violation of federal law, they did not notify the survivors that they were giving him this deal. So these women, at the time, some of whom were actually girls, and their parents who came forward about this, thought that there was some sort of justice that was going to be done in defense of either their children or themselves. And that wasn't the case. So sometimes you silence survivors that way without even them knowing they're silenced. But the larger thematic here, and the one that we never, ever, ever talk about, is that we have a silencing epidemic in this country. And the ones that we at Lift Our Voices are focused on, laser focused on, are NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and forced arbitration. But that is part of just the larger culture that we have in this country of covering up bad behavior and protecting predators at the expense of survivors. And Epstein is just the most glaring example of that. But we certainly went through it ourselves after we sued Fox News, and still are bound by NDAs, even though Fox consistently says that this is a legacy matter and all the bad people are gone. If that's the case, why not let us speak? I mean,
exactly.
The man who harassed us, allegedly, we have to say is dead. So what are we protecting here? But yet,
well, because we all know that it was hypothetically, it was beyond Roger Ailes. So look, Julie and I don't own our own voices. We may never we'll never own our own voices. That's why we do this work. But yes, to your point, there's an epidemic of silencing. But that is all. There are also cracks in that now. So getting back to the Instagram question about accountability for institutions, that is a huge ass question. Because yes, but the way that we start to break through that is to get rid of these silencing mechanisms that Julie and I fight every single day. Because when you have a crutch, like an NDA ability or a forced arbitration ability to slap somebody down and say, you don't have a voice because you signed this document when you started working here, or because I abused you and made you sign an NDA outside of the workplace. Until you start to break that chain of silence, we're not going to get to full accountability, which is why we're so invested in this story, because it's multifaceted in how important it is, but it really gets to the heart of what we fight against every single day. And so, yes, we hope there's accountability for institutions.
And I think what's to me been so dispiriting, I guess, and just to show what we're up against as an organization and as a movement. And this doesn't just apply to, obviously, Lift Our Voices. This applies to anybody who cares about survivors in any way, shape, or form, whether in the workplace or outside the workplace, as Epstein, although some of those were workplace related too, is just how many people that you have always thought were the good guys turned out to really not care about survivors. And I'll use just a few as an example. You may think they're good guys, you may think they're bad guys, depending on where you sit politically, but the whole point is it's across the board. There was no doubt by the time these emails from the Epstein estate some of them were released, that Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile. Just no doubt at all. He had already pled guilty, and it was in the press, and some of this was even after Julie K. Brown, this incredible reporter of the Miami Herald, exposed just the depravity of what happened back in 2018. And you have people, you mentioned Larry Summers, who not just the former Secretary of the Treasury, not just the former president of Harvard, but taught young kids. I mean, they're not kids, they're technically adults, they're 18, 19, 20. But nevertheless, these are young people who he was nominally kind of in care of, in the sense that he was the president of the university and continued to teach there until I think just a week or two ago. So you have somebody like Larry Summers, you have somebody like Deepak Chopra, who so many people just really look up to and respect. And you have emails between him and Epstein effectively saying, no big deal. I know that so-and-so dropped a civil lawsuit against you. Oh, great. That's really good. Knowing that the civil lawsuit was about pedophilia and about sexual misconduct. And then, of course, on the Republican side, and again, whether you like these people or not, certainly enough people do, You have people like Tom Barrack, who's now I think the special envoy for something for Trump, and also the ambassador to Turkey. And of course, Steve Bannon, who was creating an entire documentary to rehabilitate Epstein's image while joking with him about being a pedophile and a predator.
Right.
And effectively, yeah. So, you know, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And if you're a survivor at this point, who do you turn to when you don't know if the person you're turning to, who you think is a good person, is potentially somebody who's actually working to harm you? And that, I think, is why silence is so endemic. It's so awful.
It's so, yes. And that's how it keeps you from knowing who's safe and who's not. I would just say, though, before we get to this question, one other thought in what's been released so far from those emails from the House committee: the depravity of these men seeking out advice from Jeffrey Epstein about how they can score a woman. It's like, doesn't it always just come back to sex? I mean, humans are so shallow in the long run, maybe men more than women, but the idea that they were asking his advice, like, hey, how do I ask her out? Like, how do I get her in bed? How do I, oh my God.
Can I answer that question, by the way, to any men who may be watching? Because so you don't have to ask a pedophile. Ask a woman. Like, I'll tell you, be a good guy. Like, honestly, just be a good guy. That's all we really want.
The depravity and the what's the other word? Just the sickness. But I'm trying to think of another word about like how desperate they were to be able to get advice.
This is the former Secretary of the Treasury of the United States and the former president of Harvard. That's who's asking Jeffrey Epstein for advice, who, by the way, was asking for advice about a mentee, a younger woman who he was mentoring. And they're kind of joking about trying to get her, like, oh, it's the usual, you know what actually kind of grossed me out about that? If this were not Larry Summers on those emails and some freshman at Harvard, that's the kind of stuff I'd expect. Yeah, I'm going to try to get her into bed, but I don't know. She thinks of me some old, like, it's like, have you not learned anything in the 60 years since you were a freshman yourself,
No,
Secretary? Mr. Secretary, like.
No, that's why I say it comes back to the human core of the need for sex or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to go down the whole path about how potentially men feel fulfilled in life, but obviously these guys thought that Jeffrey Epstein was the answer, which is sick just to even think about.
After knowing. Not. By the way, when Larry Summers asked that question, it was not just after knowing that Jeffrey Epstein pled guilty to pedophilia. It was also after I believe it was after Julie K. Brown wrote that wonderful series. So, like, he knew the whole gamut of who this guy was.
And there was also the female Obama official who, so this
Kathy Rumler, who's now Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, we don't want to narc on just men. Okay, I think we have another question from LinkedIn. If we can throw it up. How can Congress release the full Epstein files in a way that protects survivors while still giving the public the transparency they deserve? They have to protect them. They'll just redact their names.
And by the way, this whole notion of, we have to protect survivors, so we can't do anything. If you are raped and your case actually goes to trial, and that's a big if, because I believe only 2% of all sexual assault cases actually get prosecuted and end up going to trial. But your name is always redacted, unless you don't want it to be, unless you want to just come forward. But your name is redacted. And if we use that as an excuse to protect survivors, we'd never prosecute any kind of sexual assault cases at all. So for anybody who says, we can't release the Epstein files because we have to protect the survivors, we do this. We've been doing this for decades. We've been redacting women's names for decades and men who've been raped. And it's not complicated. I mean, if you remember the William Kennedy Smith trial back in the 90s, where you had the blue dot over the woman's face, they redacted her face, they redacted her name while showing her testimony.
But I do think that there's obviously you have to do that unless you get the consent from the survivor to not do that. But I do think a really important part of this movement has been that people have been willing to put their name and face out there and say, it happened to me. And you've seen all these survivors going up on Capitol Hill and say, I bet a lot of them, since they've already come forward, they're like, leave my name in there, right? And there's a part of me that thinks that helps break this cycle of silence, because there's kind of this feeling that when you do things anonymously, and remember, Trump and MAGA were saying that, oh, we're not going to accept anonymous sources anymore because we can't believe them. And yet that's the way that we've prosecuted rape cases for generations. I do think one way to combat that is that there is power if you want it. If you want it as a survivor, there's power in putting your name and face on it. And it starts to break that cone of silence, I think, because you're standing up and saying, I'm not going to be anonymous anymore. This happened to me, and you are going to be accountable and pay for it. And I think it's stronger sometimes if you choose to put your name and face on it.
Well, I'll use you as an example, because obviously you're right here. But when you came forward against Roger Ailes and really helped to kick off this iteration of the Me Too movement, you weren't, it would not, look, you would have had every right to do it anonymously if you wanted to. I don't know how you would have done that from a legal perspective, but the reality is you risked your career, you risked everything to do it. But how much more powerful when people saw somebody who was a powerful person in that role, somebody who was an incredibly well-respected anchor, and also the anchor of one of the flagship shows on that network, to come forward and say, yeah, this happened to me. Mm-hmm. And I think, not just from speaking for myself, of course, I would never have done it if you hadn't done it first, because I wouldn't have had the courage to do it. But I think, forget me and forget Fox for that matter, how many other women said, if somebody like Gretchen Carlson had this happen to her, like, where is this going to stop, right? Because you were an incredibly powerful figure. I mean, I don't think people understood that really. None of us had power there, but publicly, you were an incredibly powerful figure, right, and at the top of your field. And so I think when you see this array of Epstein women standing up there, and you have people who are just regular now women, but were then girls coming out of broken homes, having this happen to them, standing next to women who were, some of whom have, I think, PhDs, and some of whom have just came from have a very different background. Not to say that it matters what your education level is, but it ran the gamut. I mean, he was an equal opportunity abuser. And I think if you look at the profiles of all of these Epstein women that stood up there, no matter who you are, you will see yourself in one of them at least.
Yes. And, because remember, there was always the cop-out. After I came forward, Trump said, that this would never have happened to his daughter. That is such a cop-out and such a myth, because it's not, this doesn't happen to you because you're not a strong woman. Oh. This happens to you for a million reasons, but because power is over you. Like, for my example, I wanted to continue to move up in my career. Obviously, I'd killed myself to get to the top of it. And I knew the person I had to get through was Roger Ailes. The problem was I wasn't giving him what he wanted. And that's why my career stalled. You know, people didn't know that on the outside, but that's not because I was a weak woman. Nobody's ever considered me to be weak, ever. And so I do think that that's also, I don't like it when I hear people say, oh, well, she was easy prey, so that's how it happened. That's sometimes how it happens. But it doesn't mean that only weak, easy prey women who've come from troubled backgrounds are the ones that men go after.
It's just about power. And I have to say, in some cases, the thrill for people, is to go after a strong woman and break her.
100%.
And so, that cop-out about Ivanka, first of all, I am 100% positive it happened to her at some point, that somebody harassed her. Like, it can't not have happened. But second, I guess if you work for daddy's company, maybe that's not going to happen to you in the workplace. But believe me, if you ever work for anybody else, it's going to happen to you at one point or another. And you have one of three choices, right? You could either acquiesce, which, I'm not even going to judge anybody who does anything. I'm just going to say, here are your three choices. You could either acquiesce, you can say no and keep your mouth shut, in which case chances are they will retaliate against you anyway. And the third is that you can come forward. And all of those are really hard choices to make. Not one of those choices is harder or easier than the other.
Yep.
But the whole key is that if you don't say anything and nobody says anything, the behavior will continue. And if you do say something, chances are the behavior might end, as it did, at least with Roger Ailes of Fox. Not to say we can't say much more than that, but I mean, he was ultimately not there anymore to do this to other women.
Yeah, it was fired in 2 weeks. I mean, who would have ever thought that? Okay, right before we go, I think Em has one more question for us from LinkedIn. Yep. Survivors like Annie Farmer and Danielle Bensky say this fight is not political. How do we keep the focus on people and partisanship?
On people and not partisanship. Listen, we just talked about it, right? I will say, and I've said this before on this show and other places, I am a Democrat.
I'm an independent.
Yes, I don't care. So I'll say this as a Democrat. I do not care which Democrat is named in the Epstein files. And I will go a step back. Kamala Harris is a woman, so that wouldn't have worked. If Joe Biden last year, at the height of his election, were named in the Epstein files, that would have been the end for me and Joe Biden. It does not matter. And I would hope that people who are strong supporters of this president, of Donald Trump, feel the same way. I mean, this has nothing to do with partisanship. And this is not about scoring points. What disappoints me about all this is that Trump decided he was going to launch an investigation into Democrats, right? This shouldn't be launching an investigation into Democrats. This should be launching an investigation into everybody who's in those million pages that Pam Bondi 6 months ago said did not exist, but actually obviously do exist. And it doesn't matter. Why are we making this political? The guy was a pedophile and harmed girls. And we always say, nobody asks you, Gretchen, this is your great line, I'm stepping on it, but nobody asks you if you're a Democrat or a Republican before they harass you.
Yeah. It's about power. They just do it.
Yep. And you saw those you saw those survivors standing up on Capitol Hill. A few of them said very explicitly, Mr. President, we voted for you. We are supporters of yours, Mr. President, but please release these files. I mean, these women are not making this about partisanship. And it shouldn't be about partisanship. Release the files, let the chips fall where they may. And then if you still want to vote for somebody based on what you read, that's your decision. I mean, who cares?
I mean, look, some of these women have said when they've gone that they voted for Trump.
That's what I'm basically saying.
Some didn't, some did. I mean, that's a whole nother, thing about it. It's complicated for him because he had other women who came out against him. But yeah, I mean, this is not about partisanship. The laws we've passed have all been bipartisan. To our point, this is an epidemic in America of silencing. It's not a political issue. Unfortunately, it kind of sometimes falls on political lines just because of big business issues. But in this case, it doesn't. So
yeah, and if I could just add one more thing, Gretchen. Everything in life right now is political. Everything has become partisan. I mean, truly, from where you eat your fast food to the clothes that you choose, places where you choose to shop, to obviously who you vote for. And whatever. I mean, that's the whole separate story, and that's a really horrible thing for the country, in my opinion. But there are some things in life that still need to be above politics. And my God, if you can't put the protection of young girls and women above politics, then we are in much worse shape than I think we are. And I truly believe that this country is better than that. I have to believe that, and I do believe that. So on that note, Gretchen, we are at time, I think. We're going to run.
Thank you so much for your questions today. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. I'm sure we'll be talking about this with any new developments. Maybe the files will have been released by then. Stay tuned. Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye.